Don't make that appointment yet. Before you call your stylist and ask for something shorter, there is one thing I need you to hear first, because what I am about to show you goes against almost everything you have been told about hair after 60. And once you see it, you are going to understand why the advice you have been following for years has been quietly working against you every single time. Here is the thing nobody in the salon is saying out loud. Going shorter is not always the answer. In fact, for a large number of women over 60, cutting the hair shorter is the exact move that adds years to the face instead of taking them off. And I know that is the opposite of what you have heard. I know that. But stay with me, because by the end of this video you are going to see exactly why that is true. And more importantly, you are going to see the 5 hair lengths that genuinely do work to take 10 years off the face after 60. The number 1 length on this list is the most surprising one of all. And it is the one that gets the most dramatic reactions every single time I show it to women in my chair. So do not skip ahead. We are building to it. And I promise the wait is worth it. Before we get into the countdown, let me ask you something. When was the last time someone told you that your hair looked genuinely younger and more alive? Not just neat, not just tidy, but actually younger. If that compliment feels like it has been a long time, I want you to consider the possibility that the length you are currently wearing might be the reason. Not your hair itself, not gray, not texture. The length. Here is what actually happens to the face as we move through our 60s. The face naturally softens. Volume redistributes. The jawline changes. These are not problems to be ashamed of. They are simply facts of how a face evolves. And the mistake most women make is choosing a hair length that mirrors and amplifies those changes instead of working against them. A length that cuts off at the wrong point can drag the eye downward, widen the jaw visually, and flatten the cheekbones all at once. And the worst part is that it does all of that invisibly. You do not notice it happening. You just slowly stop feeling like yourself when you look in the mirror. The right length does the opposite. It creates vertical lift. It frames the face from the correct angle. It gives the eye somewhere to travel upward instead of downward. And none of that requires surgery, product, or a miracle shampoo. It just requires understanding where the length hits your face and why that point matters more than you think. So let us count down. We are starting at number 5, which is actually the length most women are already wearing, but almost certainly wearing wrong. Number 5, the chin length bob. And before you scroll past this one because you have had a bob and did not love it, hear me out. Because the chin length bob is not one style. It is a family of styles, and the difference between the version that ages you and the version that genuinely takes years off comes down to one single detail that most stylists never explain: the mistake version of a chin length bob cuts the hair straight across at the same level all the way around the face. That creates a horizontal line, and horizontal lines on the face do one thing reliably: they widen. A perfectly flat, level line at the chin emphasizes the jawline instead of framing it. On a face that has softened over the years, that line lands right at the widest point and draws the eye directly to it, which is the last thing you want. The correct version is an angled chin length bob, slightly longer in the front than in the back. That diagonal creates movement. It draws the eye diagonally across the face rather than stopping it dead at the jaw. That single change from horizontal to diagonal is what separates the bob that ages women from the bob that rejuvenates them. And it is a conversation of about 30 seconds with your stylist if you know to ask for it. Here is the other detail: weight at the perimeter. You want the ends of an angled chin bob to have weight and density, not wispy, not feathered, not thinned out. A blunt or close to blunt edge reflects light along that line and makes the hair appear healthier and fuller even if the overall density has changed with age. A wispy edge disappears into the background and makes the style look unfinished and tired. Ask for weight at the perimeter. 3 words that can transform this cut: Now there is one face shape where the chin length bob needs a small but important adjustment. If your face is naturally fuller or rounder, the chin line may not be the ideal stopping point for you. Which brings us to number 4, and the length that actually solves that problem. Number 4, the extended bob, which sits between the chin and the collarbone, usually landing somewhere just below the jaw or at the top of the neck. This is one of the most forgiving lengths for a wide range of face shapes because it hits below the widest part of the jaw on most faces. That means the eye travels past the jawline before it stops. And that is a fundamentally different visual experience than a length that stops right at it. The extended bob also gives you something that shorter cuts cannot offer: movement. When hair has a little extra length past the chin, it sways when you walk. It catches light from multiple angles. It looks alive in a way that cropped or ear-length hair simply does not. Because the physics of movement are not there for women who have noticed their face shape shifting in the last several years. This is often the length that brings everything back into balance. Long enough to soften and frame, short enough to feel modern and intentional. Not a compromise, a deliberate choice. One thing to know about styling this length after 60, you do not need a full blowout to make it look polished. A diffuser on low heat or finger drying with a small amount of lightweight cream gives you movement and body without a fight. At this length, the cut does most of the work. Styling is just finishing, but the extended bob still stops above the collarbone. And for some women, particularly those with narrow or slopped shoulders, that can draw attention downward toward the neck rather than upward toward the face. If that sounds like you, number 3 is going to reframe everything. Number 3, the collarbone length. And this is where the conversation starts to get surprising, because most women over 60 have been told quietly by stylists, by magazines, by well-meaning friends, that longer hair is not for them, that it looks heavy, that it drags the face down, that shorter is always the more flattering choice. That is not accurate. And here is why. Hair at the collarbone creates a completely different relationship between the hair and the face than shorter hair does. At that length, the hair forms a natural frame that travels from the top of the head all the way down to the shoulders. That continuous vertical line creates length in the silhouette, not width. Length is exactly what every face gains from in its 60s. The reason longer hair gets a bad reputation after 60 is almost always a technique problem, not a length problem. When hair is long and all one weight, with no internal structure and no movement built in, it does hang heavy. It does pull the face down. And that is not the length's fault. That is the cut's fault. Collarbone length hair that has been properly layered underneath. Not on top but underneath, where the layers are invisible and only serve to remove weight and create lift, behaves completely differently. It moves, it swings, it frames the face from below without dragging the jaw downward. It is the difference between a curtain and a frame. The other reason this length is worth serious consideration for women over 60 is what it does to the neck. Hair that grazes the collarbone draws the eye along the neckline and across the shoulders in a way that is exceptionally graceful. It creates a softening effect at the décolletage that shorter cuts cannot replicate. If you have ever noticed that certain women look particularly elegant in photographs, look at the hair length. Collarbone or slightly below appears more often than you would expect. Now we are halfway through the list, and I want to pause for a second and acknowledge something. These first 3 lengths are all variations on the same principle. The hair ends before it reaches the shoulders. And if you are someone who has been told your whole life that you need to keep the hair off your shoulders as you age, what comes next is going to feel almost radical, but I need you to stay with me. Because number 2 changes the frame on everything. And number 1, the length that actually takes the most years off the face after 60, is the most counterintuitive one on this entire list. Do not leave before we get there. Number 2, shoulder length. When hair sits at the shoulder, it creates a horizontal shelf that functions as a visual anchor. It grounds the whole look. The face, the neck, and the collarbone all become one composition instead of separate elements competing for attention. That composition is extraordinarily flattering for women over 60 for a specific reason. As the face softens and the jawline becomes less defined, the visual structure that used to come from the jawline needs to come from somewhere else. Shoulder-length hair provides exactly that structure. It takes over the visual framing job that the jawline used to do on its own. There is also a confidence element to shoulder-length hair that is difficult to quantify but real. Women who wear it with the right cut tend to carry themselves differently. It reads as a deliberate, considered choice, not a default. The version of shoulder-length hair that works after 60 is not the same as the version that might have worked at 35. At 60, you want weight through the ends, a clean perimeter, and face framing layers that start at the cheekbone, not at the chin. Those face framing pieces that sit slightly shorter than the rest pull the eye upward toward the cheekbones every time. They create vertical movement in a horizontal frame. That combination is difficult to achieve at any other length. Gray and silver hair is particularly stunning at shoulder length. The natural texture of silver tends to be coarser and more dimensional than color-treated hair, which gives shoulder-length cuts a presence and personality that is almost impossible to fake with any product. If you have been fighting your silver or hiding it under heavy color, shoulder length might be the length that finally makes you see it as something to celebrate. There is one thing I want you to be honest with yourself about before deciding on shoulder length. It does require more intentional styling than shorter cuts. Not more time necessarily, but more intention. You cannot simply wash it and walk out the door and have it look considered. 10 minutes with a large barrel curling iron or a round brush on the ends is the difference between shoulder-length hair that looks effortless and shoulder-length hair that just looks long. If you are someone who will not do those 10 minutes, shoulder length may not be the right choice for your life right now. And that is fine, because number one exists, but if you will do those 10 minutes, if you are willing to give it that, then shoulder length might give you back a version of yourself you have not seen in years. And now, number one, the length I have been building towards since the very beginning of this video. The one that has transformed how women see themselves in the mirror more consistently than any other single change I have made in my career. Number one is past the shoulder, an inch, maybe two, below the collarbone. What stylists call a long lob or the upper chest length. I know what you are thinking. Longer, not shorter. After 60, you have heard the opposite your whole life. You have been told in magazines, in salons, by people who meant well, that longer hair ages you after 60, that it drags the face down, that it is too much. And I am telling you now, gently but clearly, that advice is wrong. At least for many women. Maybe for most of them. Here is what actually happens at this length. The hair travels past the shoulders and rests just below the collarbone. At that point, the eye has a very long vertical distance to travel, from the top of the head all the way down to the chest. That vertical journey makes everything along the way look more elongated. The face, the neck, the shoulders. The whole upper body reads as taller and leaner simply because the hair creates a continuous vertical line that the eye follows without interruption. Nothing creates that effect at a shorter length. A bob stops the eye at the chin or jaw. An extended bob stops it at the neck. The collarbone length stops it at the collarbone. But hair that rests an inch or two below the collarbone keeps the eye moving. And a moving eye reads the face as longer, more defined, and more youthful. The critical technical detail at this length, the one that makes or breaks it, is internal layering. The hair cannot be all one weight. If it is, it will hang and look exactly like the negative version of long hair everyone has warned you about. You need a skilled stylist to remove weight from the interior of the hair, underneath and through the mid-lengths, invisibly, in a way that creates movement without disrupting the perimeter. That technique is called internal or underneath layering. It is different from surface layering, which is visible and can look choppy on aging hair, Ask for it by name. Tell your stylist you want weight removed from underneath but the perimeter left clean and strong. That instruction tells them immediately whether they understand what you are asking for. A stylist who lights up at that description is the right one for this cut. Face framing pieces at this length are also essential. 2 or 3 strands that begin at the cheekbone and fall slightly shorter than the rest create upward movement every time the hair moves. They catch the light near the face. They draw the eye toward the eyes and cheekbones instead of downward toward the jaw. They are the secret ingredient in almost every long haircut that reads as rejuvenating rather than simply long. Color at this length matters more than at any shorter length on this list. Hair that rests on the chest is seen from a distance. It is the first thing people notice when you walk into a room. If the color is flat, all over, uniform, it will look heavy regardless of how beautifully the cut is done. What you want at this length is dimension, depth near the root, gradual lightening toward the ends. A technique that creates the impression of sun-touched hair growing out naturally, not hair that has been uniformly painted from root to tip. If you have natural silver or gray, resist the urge to add heavy all-over color to it at this length. Instead, ask for a few strategic highlights woven through the top layers, close to the face, that add brightness without erasing the natural pattern of your gray. Silver hair with dimension at this length is one of the most striking things I have ever seen in 28 years of working with clients. It reads as intentional, as chosen, as powerful, not as what everyone assumes it will read as. Let me tell you about Diane. She was 64 when she came into my chair. She had been wearing a short layered cut for 11 years, ever since a stylist told her that long hair was not appropriate for a woman her age. Those were the exact words. Not appropriate. And she believed it. So she had worn short hair for over a decade and told herself she was fine with it. The day she came in, she sat down and said, quietly, almost like a confession, "I think I miss my hair." Not a specific style, just the idea of having hair, length, presence, something to actually work with. We did not go from short to past the collarbone overnight. We took it in 2 stages over 8 months. First to the extended bob, then to the upper chest length. I showed her the internal layering technique. We added a few face framing pieces. We let her natural gray shine through with just a few brightening highlights near the face. The day she came back after growing to the final length, she looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Then she said, "I look like myself again. Not like who I was at 40, like myself right now." That is what the right length does. Not turn back the clock, not imitate something you used to be. It shows you who you are now, in the most honest and flattering light possible. So before you make that appointment and ask for something shorter because someone told you to, or because it feels safer, or because you have convinced yourself that shorter is what women your age do, I want you to go to the mirror and look at where your hair ends right now. Look at the line it creates against your face. Does that line draw your eye up or down? Does it widen the jaw or frame the cheekbone? Does it create movement and life in the face above it? Or does it stop the eye somewhere you did not want it to stop? That question is the whole conversation. Does this length lift me, or does it weigh me down? If you have been wearing the same length for years without asking that question, this is your invitation to ask it. And if the answer is that something needs to change, now you know exactly where to start. A few things before you go that will make every single one of these lengths work better for you the moment you leave the salon. First, the trim schedule. Every length on this list depends on the shape staying clean and intentional. Blunt perimeters lose their precision. Face framing pieces grow out and stop framing. Internal layers shift and the weight comes back in the wrong places. Every 6 to 8 weeks is not a luxury. It is what keeps the length doing the job it is supposed to do. Second, the product rule. The single most common mistake women make with any of these lengths is applying product from root to tip. Do not do it. Your roots need to stay as clean and product-free as possible. Every serum, every oil, every smoothing cream that touches your scalp adds weight at exactly the point where you need lift. Product belongs on the mid-lengths and the ends. That is where it does the work without the cost. Third, the heat tool that makes every length better. A large barrel curling iron, 1.5 to 2 inches, used to create one soft bend at the ends rather than a curl, is the single quickest way to transform any of these 5 lengths from fine to genuinely beautiful. You are not curling the hair. You are adding a soft movement at the bottom that makes the whole length look alive and intentional. 10 seconds per section. That is all it takes. And one final thought, because it matters more than any of the technical details I just shared, you are not too old for beautiful hair. You are not too old for length. You are not too old to feel like yourself when you look in the mirror. The version of you that catches her reflection in a shop window and smiles, that version exists at 60, at 65, at 70, and beyond. She just needs a length that is working with her face instead of against it. That is what this channel is here to help you find. Every single week, without exception, there is something I want to address before we close, because it comes up in my comments every single week. Women ask whether gray hair and length can coexist, whether silver hair looks good long, whether natural gray is something to work with or something to surrender to. Here is my honest answer after nearly 3 decades in this business. Gray hair at any of the 5 lengths on this list can be absolutely stunning, but gray hair at the wrong length can look defeated. The difference between the two is almost always the cut, not the color. Gray hair has a natural texture that younger, color-treated hair does not. It tends to have more grip, more movement, more personality. That texture is an asset, not a liability, but it behaves differently than the hair you had at 35. It can be drier, coarser in some places and finer in others, and it may not hold a style the same way. The lengths that work best for it are the lengths that let that texture express itself rather than fighting it into submission.